So, this is only the second International Design and Government Community Call of this year. So this is an effort led by Kara, who's oh, this is not correct anymore. We didn't update that slide. So Kara is no longer at the Government Digital Service, but Kara is in the Test and Learn program in Cabinet Office. That we will refresh. I'm still, though, at Digital Service in Germany, in Berlin, and I'm there the head of design. And right now, not with us, but very much here in spirit, is Victoria, who's a content designer at CTS, the Courts and Tribunal Service in the UK. So this is a call number 37. So we will increase, we always say that, but we will increase, again, the number of calls. We only had, as I said, only 2 this year, but we have a very exciting list of potential calls that we really want to do. And one of the next one might be on trains and public infrastructure and so on. And I'm very excited about like the people we have tapped on the shoulder already, but that's for another day. So we do have some upcoming events that we can already tell you about. So quite a few of us got together, of course, this year, which you can see in the screenshot at the bottom, in April this year in Amsterdam. There was a fantastic event that we co-organized with the Dutch government community. That I will not say it in Dutch, but the user needs first community. So there were about like 800 people getting together. Then we had a smaller a gathering again around the Creative Bureaucracy Festival in Berlin in June. And the next kind of like semi-big thing will be in Brussels, because our amazing colleagues at the EU Policy Lab, they will be running a kind of like, clearly like a 2-day event called Polyfutures, about reimagining policy making in Europe. And we are right now in discussions around adding kind of like a community day on top of that. So probably the 22nd of April. And that is something you will learn about in the next few days. So our colleagues in Brussels are preparing at the moment a little website about all of that. So this is something you can read upon very soon. It will be an event for about like 150 people. That's kind of like the idea. And then in addition to that, we are currently also talking to some of the Nordic and Baltic community members. They are running the little kind of like more local events, and they also have things in mind for the second half of 2026. So there is a blog post about to come out as well about international activities, and there will be little more previews as part of that. But today, let's get to the topic. We will talk about service patterns, as you might know. And we have been in our little print outlet, we've been discussing service patterns. I looked it up since 2019. So in the Service Gazette, our printed newspaper, that has been a topic for a little while now. There have been 2 articles about service patterns. One was from Nick from back then Essex Council, who wrote about service patterns. And then in a more recent edition of last year, Lawrence and Betty and Stefan picked it up from a GovStack perspective, and also recapped a little bit about like how the concept of service pattern evolved. I'll drop as well in a moment again the link to those 2 articles, so you can have a look at your own time. And then last year we did host a little workshop in Berlin. There were like, I think 5 countries or so in the room. This was about global design patterns. You can see Kara there, but also like some German colleagues and Stefan, one of the working group members of GovStack. And we looked at some of the GovStack patterns in that workshop, which was a really fruitful conversation. So so we have been talking about the patterns now for a while, and this is why we are extremely happy to make this a topic today. And we have 3 fantastic speakers who share all their wisdom, all of their knowledge on the topic. And then, yeah, of course, we do have time to ask plenty of questions. So first up, we have Jaz. Jaz has been working at the UK Department for Education as a head of service design. And now Jaz is the head of service and organizational design at TPXimpact, with quite a few of you might remember TPXimpact with the name FutureGov, which was like one of the organizations earlier. And then afterwards, we will hear from Martin and Nikola, who are both working at the UK Ministry of Justice. And this is where I do stop talking. And then if Kara, if you have a last thing that I forgot to mention, like please chip in, of course.
No, I think you covered everything. Thanks.
There were 2 more people in the lobby. Sorry, I'm just letting in the people from the lobby. Okay, so fantastic. So now I have to see, Jaz, do you have already the make a presenter? Now, Jaz, you are a presenter. That should work.
Okay, I will try to share my screen, and fingers crossed it's going to work.
Amazing.
Okay, let me know if you can see my screen. Okay, just as a heads up, I can't see the chat feature. So if someone asks a question, maybe just interrupt Martin and ask me the question if you want, or we could wait to the end and we can cover all the questions at the end. I'll try my best to pause where I think there might be questions. So, hello everyone, I'm Jaskiran Kang. You can call me Jas. Sometimes I'm known as Jaskang online. Yeah, I'm here today to join you on the 37th International Design in Government, and I'm here to talk about service patterns. So a little bit about me, if you haven't come across me, don't know me, because I know that actually with it being an international conversation, a lot of my work is based in the UK. So what have I been doing? The Martin explained, I'm the head of service and org design at TPXimpact. TPXimpact is a consultancy that works in public sector, local government, charity, and some private sector organisations. We pride ourselves on working on purpose-driven work. You can have a look at our website if you're new to TPXimpact. But talking about service patterns, I've been talking about service patterns in whatever space I can speak about patterns. 2 years ago, I did a talk at SD and Gov talking about designing the culture through communities, which then improves delivery outcomes. I think that's online somewhere that you can watch. I ran a workshop with Abari and Tash, who are my colleagues at TPXimpact, where we basically we built an in-house workshop that we were delivering with our clients. And I thought it was really important to share some of that in the open with everybody, because I actually think community-driven initiative on patterns is really important. And so we did some of that. We hosted a Services Week conversation with MOJ, with Nikola and Martin, who are here today, and some other folks across government who were also thinking and talking about patterns. And then I decided to do a bit of a write-up on Medium, just to articulate the why, the purpose, and my rationale behind why this is important. So just a few things here. And today, what I've done is I've mushed all these things together to... Oh, Martin, just really quickly, I can still see your screen. Have I lost the internet? Uh-oh.
We can see yours.
Okay, that's fine then. As long as you can see mine, I can still see Martin's screen. I just checked. I just wanted to make sure that it was moving, but that's fine. Okay, I'll just keep going if you can see it. Okay, so I've mushed this all up together for you today. And so it's going to be a combination of the why, it's going to be a combination of some theory that we share in our workshops, and then I probably want to end it with some like tools and things that we're creating to help the wider community and build capability, I suppose, in pattern spotting, using patterns and applying patterns, which is probably a nice segue into the work that Nikola and Martin are doing as well. So TPXimpact, really quickly. So as Martin alluded to, there's the Essex Digital Service. That was the work that Nick Ward did when he was working at the Essex Council. We, as FutureGov, were the consultancy that worked in partnership with them. And so there's a whole bunch of write-ups and material that you can read up on if you're new to patterns. We then carried on working with DWP to look at their taxonomy and understanding service patterns from their perspective. We've written a blog post on that, so you can have a read. But then also we've looked at service patterns as a strategic service design approach for a national health system in one of our countries that we've worked with. And Ben Holliday, who's our chief design officer at TPX, has almost done a write-up of all the history you could find around patterns. So if you wanted to do basically the history of service patterns, it's all documented, and so Ben's done that. So that's probably a useful link if you're interested. But we're not the only ones, right? This work is happening everywhere. Lots of people think it's a good idea. So if you wanted to take a screenshot of this particular slide, please do. Yeah, we're not the only ones talking about patterns. There's lots of great thinking and work happening. What I think the thing to just sort of note is people are doing this inside organizations because it's the right thing to do, but there's not real investment, like proper investment into looking into patterns in like the detail that I'd like. But hopefully through some of the work that all of us collectively are doing and chipping away at it, there might be something in the future, I hope. So if you're still like, well, yeah, Jazz, you've just shared that all this work is happening, but I'm new to patterns. The way that I like to describe it to people is our brain is wired to recognize patterns to make sense of the world and the structure around us. It's just how our brain works. And I'll give you a sort of a demonstration of that. Patterns are everywhere. And here are some everyday patterns. So for example, swimming, running, putting your child to sleep. One that came from our practice was making hot compost, making chili oil. So like there might be things on this page, or there might be some other things that you're thinking about. But what you might find is there are other people across this world that probably share the same mental pattern that you have, and you'll have different ways and techniques in which you do those. But if you wanted to see improvements, we'd need to work on each of those to reach to a particular outcome. And the outcome might slightly be different depending on the person. But essentially, these are patterns that we do think about without realizing, but it's just something we do. So we invested some time internally at TPX to define and describe what we mean by patterns, because we thought it was really important that we as a collective should be able to talk about this stuff in a consistent and aligned way. And so we had 22 service designers. We ran multiple workshops, but the thing to note is a lot of our service designers are working in lots of different sectors. And that for me was like the golden opportunity, because it wasn't just a service designer working in one space. They have lots of experience in lots of different spaces. And that for me was richness. So I thought that was the right space to run this workshop. So what we've done is we've defined patterns as useful, replicable parts of services. Service patterns are identified, mapped, and tested as common building blocks. So these could be steps, stages, or tasks of end-to-end services, reflecting common things that a user needs to do when they interact with services. And finally, service patterns are about testing, iterating, and evidencing, which will then reduce the efforts to deliver integrated services and user outcomes, creating a more consistent and familiar service, hopefully. And if there was just one thing that you just take away from this talk today, the thing that I want you to take away is that collaboration is key. It's really, really important. I'm going to go into why the collaboration is really important in a bit. But essentially, we need to co-design across government to create these patterns, or simply document and share what works. And ultimately, we need these small steps that can lead to significant change, because I'm going to go and share, like, the problem that we're trying to solve is huge. And like, one person alone is not really going to be able to solve this. So we all need to be aligned, and we all need to be sort of in agreement with what we're trying to do. And I suppose we're just trying to facilitate some of those conversations. So I'm going to give you an example. This is the one I used at SD&Gov when I gave this talk. I think it's one that I think is a nice, helpful way of describing what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. So I'm thinking about it in this way. Patterns are important, and I'm like a big advocate for it. So thinking about patterns in systems, so you could look at patterns from a service perspective, you could look at patterns from a whole service perspective, and I suppose that's where my head's at. I'm thinking about whole end-to-end services. So just to sort of like plant seeds, and then I'll hopefully like get to what we need to get to. Here's a community of people who have all got specialist skills, and when they come together, they create harmony. And the reason why they can create harmony is because they've got a common set of values, principles, and purpose. So each section, from strings to percussion, operate within its own set of responsibilities and expertise, as you'd expect. And these various elements work independently, mastering their specific roles and preparing to contribute when the time is right. And when these components come together, the result is nothing short of perfection. The performance is a product of a clear roles, meticulously defined processes, and then collaborative synergy. So now, if you apply the same model when you're accessing care, we encounter complex layers. Now, this is just a model from the UK. I imagine you might have different labels, different services in the way that you describe it, but essentially, accessing care is a thing that I know is international. So take what you can from this. And what we will encounter is complex layers, and often notice the impact when one department isn't functioning efficiently. A service is only as strong as its weakest link, and for comprehensive care to work, we need cross-departmental collaboration, which with unified standards and governance. And like to succeed, our care system must align its organisation, its infrastructure, its services, its intent, and the culture, much like musicians, to create a flawless performance. And then inside the system is people who need to work together as a joined up community, because ultimately you need to work in your silo to chip away at the thing that you're trying to do. But when you lift your head out of the water and you look at the helicopter view, all of these things need to work together. So ideally, what we really need is diverse groups of people who are aligned towards common goals, who are guided and supported. And so what does that look like? What does that feel like? And then again, at SD&Gov in 24, I shared a personal story where my sister tried to secure care for my Babaji, call them Babaji, that's granddad in my language. And she had to navigate through a maze of organisations, the local authorities, central government departments, charities and private companies. Some parts of the system work really well, using shared systems, a clear process, but many didn't. And then each like sometimes operated on different principles, disconnected technologies and inconsistent approaches. And the lack of integration is what created stress and delay. And then if you multiply that, so we have this body called the CQC, and on their website, they mention that there's 7 million people currently on the elective care waiting list. And the scale, so when you look at that and you scale the challenge and the cost and the impact, it's quite staggering. I've written about this on my Medium account, so I can't go through the whole talk with you today. But essentially what I noticed through the work that I did was there were some repeating patterns, common patterns, that probably could do with some thought and thinking around, so that we could deliver a consistent user outcome. And these are some that I imagine will be true, not just for the health sector, but from other areas as well. So why do I care about it? I care about it because very few service patterns are actually defined or written down. So they aren't yet reusable as a standard design tool that we could use to improve the consistency in experience or technology and data implementation. Data and tech implementation being quite important because there's loads of investment going into this. And so I just think service patterns is a huge opportunity. Well, this is the priority, like for government and in internal organisations. So what I think and what we think as a collective, I've spoken to various people, and I think we're very much aligned. And whilst we're looking at it from different angles, what I'm finding is actually our approaches and what we're trying to do is we're actually very aligned, which is great to see. We think pattern spotting will help us be intentional about the services we are designing for. So just like the everyday patterns I shared, you have to really think about these things and lift them and actually call them what they are, and just like agree on what we call them as well. And so what we need to do is ensure that they're built for reuse, consistency and best practice. And ultimately, hopefully, we improve the outcomes for users and reducing the need for us to design from scratch. That's not to say that we shouldn't be testing and iterating. And ultimately, through doing this work, we sort of move towards pattern standards. So we know, I also recognise there's lots of great work happening, but it's in silos. And we know it's good because that's where we have to work in this way, right? But for integrated services to work, we need to share this language, we need to agree on the language, and we need to document it. But we need to sort of chip away at it and actually define the pattern. So that work needs to happen at that service level. But then there needs to be that holistic view as well, and looking at all the different patterns and go, well, what does good look like? So this is kind of where we're at as an organisation, right? And so I was thinking about tools that we can create. And so internally at TPX, not just me, but the collective practice. So I'm very lucky that I work with such a talented group of people. And so together we've formulated workshops and we've worked on, well, how do we define it? And I feel like these might not be perfect, but this is essentially a prototype that we're moving towards, so that we can maybe have that first dirty draft that we can publish for people to use, and then we can build on it. But we've got to start somewhere. So appreciate that these might not be perfect, but that's okay, I think. So we're in the process of just prototyping, and every time we work with a client, or every time we have some internal time, or we run a workshop, which is what we recently did, and I'm still yet to document the outputs of that workshop. So that will come, and that will be the first published thing that we open. And we are making it open source as well, so we're not holding it all internally. So first of all, what we're doing, we're building these pattern cards to identify and describe what we mean by the different patterns. And these are like common patterns that we have found appear multiple times across the spaces that we work in. So we had a bit of a stab at SD and Gov when we ran the workshop, and we'll share some of that as the first sort of like few handful of patterns that we can share. So look out for those. And then what we're then also doing is applying full stack service thinking onto it. So I just want to quickly go into, well, what is full stack service design? So Sarah Drummond is the person who's the founder, or has done a beautiful write-up of this work. I think, Martin, if you can share the link, that'd be great. So just really quickly, again, read through it. It's going to take some time to run through it. I'm going to run through the different components really quickly. So the way full stack service design thinks about it is that, number one, there's a service. So these are the things that user sees and interacts with. And traditionally, this is a space that people think about, right? And that's important. And we should think about these things, because ultimately we're trying to improve the outcomes for the user that can navigate through that whole system. And when we're thinking about life events, that's the whole system that, I'm thinking about. But me alone, or people in my organization alone, can't chip away. We need it to be a shared community-driven initiative that we can sort of align on as a sector. Two, the infrastructure. So these are the things that enable our services to be delivered. So this might be the technology, it might be the system, it might be the architecture. So that's the infrastructure that the services are sitting on. The organisation, number three, which is how we organise ourselves to make decisions. And so the way our organisation organises itself in terms of how like the service is delivered, where people sit in the organisation, taxonomy, all of these things make a difference on what you're enabled to do and what you can't do, and the constraints, etc. The intent, the reason we provide our services, so there will be an intent, there'll be a policy intent a lot of the time when we're working with government departments. So that sometimes is a driver for what we're doing. And then the culture, so the conditions that affect how we make decisions. And ultimately the culture is the wrapper that holds all of these things together. And so that will be where how someone can make decisions, or how empowered they feel, or the consequences of doing something. So taking that model is what we're using. So all the different bits, I have a look at Sarah Drummond's write-up, but we're using that as the principles, or the sort of the backbone of how we're thinking about patterns. So just to sort of dive into how we're doing it, so if you're interested in going away and having a look at it, these are just some of the things that like are important when you're thinking about patterns. So mapping the high level journey for a pattern is really important. And what we find is when people do that, what we're really trying to do is to find out where the commonalities are. So we're sort of like not looking at the difference, like we're not looking at the uniqueness of that journey. We're looking at the key, like, because we're trying to create the standard for what good looks like for check in this example. So what can we pull out like across sector, so that it's not actually solving the problem, but it's providing a guide or a tool to help you navigate through what you might want to consider when you're thinking about a pattern. Teasing out examples. So through the mapping of the high level journey, identifying different examples of what a journey or a pattern could look like. So what we're trying to tease out is what's the same and what's different. Where are these differences? Why are they different? Do they need to be different? And I think that's really important, because naturally through all the services that we've looked at so far, we know there are differences. So for example, in the check pattern, there was 3 different types of checks. There was one which was to validate. So this might be like to check a bus timetable. This is basically static data. The other one was to establish. So the user needs to understand the options available to explore what the next steps might be. So this is like giving people choice. And then the third one was live data. So the user needs to know information based on live data. So this is going to be variable depending on the situation. So then what we also did was we looked at the full stack model, and we pulled out a bunch of questions from there that were relevant and like important to think about when you're thinking about it. So in our workshops, we have highlighter pens where we highlight the questions that are relevant for a particular pattern to help us define what good looks like. But then also this could be the framework that people can use when they're sort of like taking the high level pattern and then they're thinking about it in their context of their service area. Because like I said, like when we're thinking about like making chili oil, for example, one person might make it in a slightly different way, the other person will make it in a slightly different way. But when you're perfecting it, there'll be some core steps that are consistent, but there'll be other things that are not consistent because it depends on the environment or temperature or the ingredients, so it will vary, right, in the same way that when you're delivering a service. And then considering questions for your pattern. So taking the full stack service model, using the framework that we've created, we're then pulling out questions, and we're sort of like encouraging people to pull those questions out that are relevant. And we're looking out for, well, are there some common questions that are true for all service areas when we're thinking about it from a holistic perspective? And then finally, what we're then doing is trying to prototype the pattern in the most simplest, accessible way possible that's easy to find. So this was like a printout that I have actually got it, but it's upstairs, so I probably won't do that now. But we're prototyping, so it's a tangible thing, and you can see the information in an order. So for example, the pattern card is the first thing you see in the back bit to just describe the pattern. And when you open it, you might have your prompt questions, and then you might have your variants, and then you might go into the sort of like a high level journey map of the pattern and the differences within there. That might then help someone to maybe quickly prototype that check and see whether it works. That doesn't eliminate testing and validating by any means, but it might help with a standard language that we can use to get us started. So I'm going to stop here. I think I've taken up the time that I was given, but we've got this QR code. So if you're interested in anything I've shared or you want more details, we are running these pattern spotting workshops to build capability, to share these tools, give people that time and to actually get hands-on with patterns. And what we've done with our clients is we've gone into departments, we've brought quite a lot of the various service teams together, and each service team sits on a slightly different table, and they work through some of the exercises that we've got, and then we bring it all together and we mix everyone up, and then we define the standard for what good looks like for their particular department. I think that's really important, but I suppose we're really interested in that holistic end to end, and as we build up the knowledge and we build up the artifacts, we'd like to publish them and share those. So if you're interested, we charge a small cost for it. Me, Tash, and various people from our service design and org design practice run them. Have a look. We've got a page here. We're working on publishing the patterns that we did at SD and Gov, like I said. That is me in a nutshell. I don't know if anyone's got any questions, Martin, or if anyone's, I can't see the chat, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really great. As I can't see the chat either, someone else might take a look. But I think as we're a small group, like we can also allow people to unmute themselves and just like ask a question into the space.
There's no questions in the chat, but if someone wants to use that to ask questions, I can read them out. But yeah, please come off mute if you would like to ask a question or add a comment.
May I ask a question, Jazz? Like, what kind of response on like the notion of service patterns in the first place have you got from kind of like senior leaders in departments? Because I think I'd say the UK has been making progress when it comes to introducing really like a service lens to government departments' duties, but like service patterns, like from your observation, like where are we, and what are maybe as well kind of like the challenges when it comes to convincing senior leaders that we have to think in these terms?
So the reality is there's like, I haven't seen any funding, like real investment, which is what I was saying at the beginning, go into service patterns. But we have, like, we as an organisation have been working on patterns with various clients, and we've just brought that thinking into the way that we work. And I think that's really important. So as head of design, head of service design, sorry, in org design at TPX, like we are building internal capability, but like that's to like bring some of that thinking. So when we show up into different client spaces, we just bring that with us, and we map things out, and we're intentional about spotting those patterns. So I think that's really important. But then the reason why I'm over sharing in lots of different spaces is because my old like civil servant hat, I know that it's really important that we can share that capability across government, because like just one organisation alone isn't enough. Like this has to be community driven, and I think it's just how we work, is how we need to show up. If we get proper investment, so obviously Nikola and Martin are a bit special case because they are actually doing lots of great work. So I'm not going to go into that because I know they're doing some really exciting work. And so, yeah, when you're a mature department, I think it happens, or at least you have the right people in the organisation that enable it to happen. But yeah, I think it would be good if there were some actual work, but like a lot of the work that we've done it because we knew it's a good idea, and it's just how we showed up.
Cool. Fantastic. Then again, thank you so much. And maybe there will be more questions coming later after the second input. And I think I can only make one person the presenter at one time or so. So I'll try that. Yeah. Thanks again, Jazz. Like really, really good Really good thoughts and really good work. Okay. Oh, wow, this works. Okay, Nikola, yeah, we can see your screen now.
Can you see it actually?
Yes, it's up. It's a blue slide. Yes.
Right, I can't see now. So WebEx is fun. Brilliant. Let me find the right screen. There we go. So, well, very excited to be here on this lovely Friday morning. It's actually getting a bit sunny here now, so that's quite nice. We are going to talk a bit about what's our view of reuse and patterns, and because everyone has a slightly different view of what it is, I think, still. And yeah, how we tackle them in UK government and in Ministry of Justice in our case. So hello, I'm Nikola. I'm the head of design, Ministry of Justice UK. Been in that in the department for like 8 years now. Yeah, and I have the amazing Martin with me, who is a lead designer for prisons at Ministry of Justice. So we are going to talk a bit about why we are doing this, what things are actually shareable and or what could be patterns, where we want to get to, and then how we are tackling this, and quickly talking about 4 initiatives that we are running. And then Martin is going to tell you more about the service patterns and the experiments we're doing there. So why are we doing this? Yeah, so when I joined the civil service and I came into MOJ building a new legal aid service, and it's just I thought over and over again, this, you know, someone has to be doing this the same thing, or this has to be done before, you know, this is nothing new what I'm doing here. And but you're really trying to find any kind of earlier work or any connections with people who are doing the same thing seemed really impossible or extremely time consuming. And so at some point you just give up and then do the thing again. And I think that's really the most serious hurdle we have to the kind of real transformation we want in government. That we are all working in our silos and we're all working the same problem over and over again. And we are now trying to tackle this with some kind of a reuse by design approach, where we're trying to start building centralized reusable infrastructure and then also at the same time developing a reuse culture. And really imagine, yeah, if we were able to share and reuse our work across our government, across the world, we would unlock just incredible savings, and this would really allow us to focus on the unique, the exciting, the innovative parts of our services. To give you a bit of context of the scale and size of this, so UK civil service are 500,000 people. So this is, you know, bigger than IBM, Google, and Meta combined. So we have 465 departments and thousands of services. So Ministry of Justice alone is nearly 100,000 people. So this is a huge amount of people who could connect and collaborate. But we are really not harnessing, you know, this large crowd. We really, yeah, there's so much impact we could have if we would start working as one organization. What is it we can share? So quick disclaimer, the kind of things we're talking about today, this is all in a way work in progress. So yeah, some things are going on for years and some are new. So nothing set in stone yet. So we would really, you know, love to get your feedback and see if you're working on similar things. And this is really us saying, we think all of that stuff needs to happen and we don't want to do it alone. So please work with us on those things. What do we mean when we say reuse? So we are currently finding shareable things of all sorts in 3 buckets. So we have the how to build things bucket. This is components, productification. This is anything from the design system to service patterns, apply for a thing, to common components, to case management systems. So all the kind of blocks we have. Then there is find and shared. So this is knowledge management, really. This is a massive bucket, really. So this is all the kind of the service knowledge we have. What would you have to tell a new person who starts working on a service? So how do we tell the story of a service histories, all of the stuff that's there, but also in silos usually. And then the how we do things. So that's the culture and ways of working bit. So this is standards, principles, best practice, templates, common artifacts, all those kind of things. Where do we want to get to? So you can probably already see that reuse and pattern. So it's not just about building a pattern. It's also about developing completely new ways of working around that. In all of our work streams, so we are working really as close as possible with other UK departments, but as close as possible is usually not as close as we wanted. So other departments obviously, have their own backlogs. They often just don't have the capacity to get involved as much as they and we would have liked. And for us at the MOJ, so I've been pushing that for years, and by now reuse is a huge topic. So we have some good buy-in internally. We have directors who really want to do this, and so we are pushing this work forward, often with an MOJ focus, but because we have to tell the story internally about the impact it has. But we always have cross-gov in mind, obviously, and we're always considering how these things we're doing could scale wider, which different models could we test. So yeah, we really are trying to reinvent, the cross-gov collaboration here, and trying to find new models of how we could do this better. How are we tackling this? So a bit of to sum up the 2 sides of reuse that we need to tackle. So there's the things we can share and reuse, and then there's the culture about reuse. And when we have the things that are reusable, so building a service should look like this. So you have the majority of building blocks, hopefully. You have a lot of knowledge, you have a good starting point for how services look like and how they work. And then you can make it excellent by bringing it all together with what makes your service unique, and make it much quicker, much easier, and everything is aligned. But we also need to design these new ways of working that enable us then to share and reuse. So there is something around that we need to develop completely new ways of working for our teams. So instead of, we're now building one service that does a specific thing, we want to start looking at, so what's the reusable core of the service? And then what are the layers on top of these unique parts? So requesting a thing, and requesting a bin from your council, or a prisoner requesting a doctor's visit, or things like that. So that's the unique parts, then that layering on top. But building services in such a way, really, that's not something we've done before, and we really need to work our way through how to do this in some kind of an efficient and scaled up way, because it's very different to how we work currently. And we also need to embed sharing our work so other people can actually find it into our workflows much stronger. And that really has to go beyond, we're doing some show and tells and there's some documentation somewhere. So we need some kind of a super easy, welcoming, contribution model to everyone, being much easier for people to share their work as well. And yeah, we need to get much better at collaborating and thinking cross-gov, and thinking cross-gov by default as well. So that's our four initiatives that we're running currently. So the design system, that's the most mature one that's really been going on. So that's the MOJ design system. There's also obviously the GDS one. MOJ design system has been also going on for years. So we currently actually have 2 teams, and we're scaling up into more teams. So we have a core team, and then teams that specifically build things for the probation service and so on. And in that space, we do lots of experimentation, and we really learn great stuff, around what's the business model for reuse. So what does the ideal team for something like this look like, and team models, and how do we work with other areas, and how can we make contribution as easy as possible, so it's just a one-step thing, and also how we can scale things up. So you can already see there is a lot of thinking as well that really could work in a cross-gov space. Service patterns, so this is the work stream we want to talk more about today. Also been going on for a couple of years, and doing some really cool cross-gov work, but also starting on some fascinating work in-house in our service teams. And a lot of that is really about understanding the field, and in a way, service patterns are scoping out the opportunities for all of reuse, and it also helps us thinking about how we can measure impact in the whole field. Common components is quite new for us, so that is really the engineering side of reuse, and we really only started investigating how we can start building shared components this year. But we have a new chief technology officer, and hopefully this will get a lot more priority in the next year. And then brand new, we have our Gov reuse library, just launched a few weeks ago. And this is about building a central space where all of these things can live. So where learn how we can start building a new way of cross-gov collaboration, and have one space where people can find things that are useful. I'll drop the link to that in the chat. Please have a look. We're really in the phase now where we're looking for feedback, and we're looking for other things that should be in the library. And have a look, please, and give us feedback, and give us content that you think should be in the library. And now Martin is going to talk about our service pattern work. Handing over.
Okay, can I set as a presenter? Let's find out.
Yes,
okay.
We can see that. Yes, perfect.
Excellent. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. As Nicola said, my name is Martin Ford Downs. I'm a lead service designer at the Ministry of Justice at the UK government. It's tricky being named Martin and working in design when there are certain other Martins out there, but I'll do my best. I primarily work on the design of digital services for prisons in England and Wales, but I also lead our work on service patterns. So, we've defined service patterns as a structured way of describing repeatable user tasks that can be combined to build or shape end-to-end services. We believe they can be used to understand and organize the services you offer, as well as support you to build new services. I'll be concentrating more on service patterns as a tool to build services, but I'll cover the other side of that briefly as well. Firstly, though, I want to contextualize our work. For this audience, I'm probably going to tell you things that you already know, but as there are a few approaches to service patterns out there, I think it's important to describe how we've approached it so you understand our assumptions. You'll all be familiar with the sorts of patterns that we already have in design systems today, and they are a proven way to create more consistent and accessible user experiences in an efficient way. And some of those patterns are already relatively complex, involving multiple pages, branching paths, like this one for checking whether a service is suitable for you. So from there, it's reasonable to ask, could we define patterns for more complex tasks? The opportunity seems obvious. if we take applying for things as an example of a complex task, there are many instances of that in the UK public sector. Here are just a few of them. And in many cases, these services are already similar because they're using our design system despite having been built by different teams and different organizations. But we haven't defined anywhere what applying as an end-to-end experience should or could look like across the whole public sector. And this is not a new observation. Martin noted at the start of the call that there's been a few articles in the last 10 years in the Service Gazette, and here's a blog from nearly 10 years ago now from UK government. Quick side note here, Nick Ward was mentioned earlier on from Essex County Council, and I met him for the first time in person at SD and Gov this year. Now, if there's any celebrities in the service patterns world, it was nice to meet Nick in person. So progress was being made, but I think the COVID pandemic really got in the way. And it's only in the last few years that several organizations have started to experiment again. And that wasn't coordinated. I think just a few of us came at it independently, and thankfully we met up and identified each other, and now we're doing more collaborative work. So if I jump back to our definition, service patterns describe repeatable user tasks that can be combined to build or shape end-to-end services. How do they differ from the patterns that we already have in design systems? Here's how we're positioning it. Firstly, this is all part of one ecosystem, but where components in design systems tend to focus on digital interactions for specific user actions, and the patterns we get there are more complex and describe some complete user tasks, they don't normally describe the complete end-to-end journey a user would go on to complete their goal. So for us, service patterns are about looking at those complete user journeys, like applying for something or making an appointment. They're multi-channel, so they consider steps beyond the digital screen. Their scope is broader, and that means they're likely to be less specific, and that's because they have to work across more contexts. Whilst many parts of a service can be standardized, bigger patterns will likely mean more complexity and variations to cater for necessary differences. Applying to be a foster parent probably should be more complex than applying for a parking permit. So service patterns like this will sit at a medium level of zoom, not so detailed that they are too restrictive and can't be easily reused, but also not so high level that they don't really provide any value. Just the content that we are most confident is common and shared across all services of a certain type. This is our approach, but we have observed on the whole two main starting points for service patterns work. I think some are starting with our digital design systems and are attempting to go from there into more complex digital patterns. Most of us are working on digital services, and so that approach makes sense. It's about how can we build better digital services, so with a focus on screens and flows and components. The other starting point, and this is more where I come from, is more of a framework, understanding the services an organization offers, thinking about how you can organize by those services, and then capturing a lot of rich content of different types about the service, which should still include recommendations to digital components, but starts from a channel agnostic position, and so prioritizes things like common shared user needs. I'll show a bit more on that in a moment. So at the Ministry of Justice specifically, we started by identifying our potential service patterns. Teams were asked to describe the user tasks their services facilitated in their own words. We sorted, categorized, and iterated on those findings to identify our common pattern needs. This is one of many workshops we had where we were playing with early definitions of what our patterns could be. That has all led to these 9 keywords that we're calling our service patterns. This list has changed. It'll probably change again. We spent a while getting stuck on, oh, is it 9, is it 10, is it 11, is it 30? And our approach now is more, we think this covers most of the things our users need to do. Maybe in the future we'll need to break some of the bigger ones down slightly, but we would rather get to something good and reusable for a couple of these than to spend a lot of time thinking theoretically about just how many we should have, but not actually getting to the content underneath them. So let me break down what we think parts of a service pattern could look like if you had a library of service patterns with a set of assets. I'm going to use applying for a passport as an example. That's probably more relatable than my going to prison examples that I'm doing in my day job. If getting a passport is an end-to-end service, then we can break that down into several parts. You will need to apply for the passport. You may need an appointment to prove your identity. A decision will be made and you'll be informed of the outcome. There could be other parts too. And so you can see already that we think most end-to-end services will probably require multiple service patterns to put that service together. We could break down the service patterns further. We've called these sub-patterns or steps. So within apply, you might need to prepare to apply, submit the application. We're not saying these are 100% prescriptive. Each service needs to decide which part and in which order work best. You might not need to give supporting evidence as part of some applications. Sometimes it's tricky to know where one service pattern should start and another should end, because some of these sub-patterns could exist in multiple service patterns as well. But we think that on the whole, as long as you have the building blocks somewhere to put it together, it's maybe less important whether we make await outcome part of the apply service pattern or another one, as long as it's there and can be pulled in to be used as appropriate. You could take this further. So under prepare to apply, we can start to define standard tasks like finding the right application form and checking eligibility. The bit that I'm most excited about, though, is the guidance or this rich content I talked about before that we could put alongside a service pattern. So user needs. What do we already know about users applying for things? If we document what we already know, it avoids rediscovering old insights, and it should free up time to learn what's new or different. Or scenarios. These are the happy paths and unhappy paths through a service. What happens if someone abandons their application and comes back later? This is about helping designers to avoid any dead ends in their service by anticipating all the things that could happen at the start. As you can see, there are other ideas on this slide too. This is not definitive, but it's from our research so far, these categories of guidance have proven to be the useful ones, or the ones that people are interested in. I'll say again, our approach is largely about framework, guidance, and context setting. It's less about coding screens. I see service patterns as a map or a guide to various types of information, including reusable components that you will need to build a service, but also as a framework that can be used for scoping services early. So before a designer, we always hope a designer is involved right at the very start, but making it easy for other professions as well to approach a new idea and think about, oh, well, it involves an application, it involves a decision being made. It can also be used for really early lo-fi paper prototyping or journey mapping. But we're still exploring whether this provides enough value, and if we need to get closer to more traditional components and patterns or not. Within the Ministry of Justice, we've applied this to people in prison requesting things. People need to request all sorts of things in prison. That could be access to healthcare, information about their sentence, or change to their cell. The outcomes differ, but the core request process has repeatable elements. And also right now we have multiple teams developing different request services. So service patterns as an approach helps us ensure consistency there without having to give all the responsibility to a single team. This one was documented a bit like a service blueprint and has been shared with the different teams working on request services. Another experiment I'm involved in is a grassroots cross-government working group in the UK government looking at what could service patterns mean across UK government. I say grassroots because this is not an unauthorised thing from the top. This is just something that a few different departments got together to work on. Myself, Lindsay Stevens from Department of Work and Pensions, and Gareth Thomas from DEFRA in particular. We've run a few sessions and we've confirmed that most departments share the same overall service pattern needs, and we have a general agreement on the sort of stuff you would find in a pattern. And then we worked collaboratively to create 2 test patterns or proofs of concept. Firstly, for apply, there's about 5 organisations involved in that one. And then during Services Week 2025, we did one for appointments. We had about 30 organisations crowdsourcing content for that. We focused on just a few categories of information. So user needs, sub-patterns, and user scenarios. We're not pitching these as complete service patterns, but you can see that based on the input of the 5 departments for applying and the 30 departments for appointment, we've come to a set of user needs that we think, if not quite always apply, are likely to apply to your service and therefore should be checked and verified as being useful to you, but also serve as a tool of making sure you don't miss things when you start building a service. And then for the sub patterns there, that's about breaking it down to its component steps and tasks. And user scenarios, that's the happy paths and unhappy paths through a service. I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to pick up the pace a little, but I did want to highlight a few other organisations in the UK working on service patterns that have informed my thinking, and just to give you a sense of the variety that's out there. I mentioned Lindsay at Department for Work and Pensions before. They've been doing some good work. I think they've worked with TPXimpact on this as well, where they've got quite a comprehensive approach to the information they can capture about both user and business orientated needs. There are some of the categories of information they're capturing there, and this, you're obviously not going to be able to read this, but it's just to give you a sense of the scale of the information they're capturing. I think they're still just trying to decide, is this too much? Is this right? They're also experimenting now with whether service patterns should be a tool for designers, or actually is it more useful for people like our product managers and other professions, perhaps in teams where there's less access to designers, and what can we give them to make sure they are still able to do something that is user-centered and based on the user. And then Kirsty Sinclair, who works at the Scottish Government, I really like the work that she's doing. These are her service patterns right now. You can see there's more there than I have. I think our patterns all cover the same things. It's just that these have been broken down to a slightly lower level of detail. And Kirsty and her team have been working on use of paper elements as a way of engaging teams at the early stages of conceiving of a new service and starting to lay out the elements of the service with people in the room. I really like this approach. It's something that I want to collaborate with Kirsty on some more. And then finally, I'm conscious that I think there are some folks from GovStack on the call, and I am massively overdue a catch up with them. So I am not presenting this on behalf of them, but I know they have run a few hackathon days just in the last couple of weeks. And they've been looking at whether we could use service patterns for things like e-signatures, digital wallets and payments. And I think they're taking a slightly different approach with this, but again, just showing you there is a variety out there. So before wrapping up, in summary, the potential benefits we see. I mentioned at the start that service patterns can help you organize and understand the services you offer. If you just start by understanding what you do today in categories like applying or booking appointment, you might have hundreds of services, but you will probably find that at a fundamental level, you do a far smaller number of things, just with some variations. Documenting this can be a powerful tool for talking to stakeholders about duplication in an organization, paving the way to make the case for improvement through more consistent and repeatable design approaches. That then means when you are commissioning new work, service patterns can be a framework for scoping. If a new need can be defined by its service patterns, you can immediately identify what you already know and can reuse. They avoid repeating research into things you already know, so creating more time to discover fresh new insights. They can guide you to reusable assets and components. And so these two factors combined may mean faster delivery. And if we get this right, users will have more consistent experiences across all your services. But this is important. Service patterns do not replace the need for design. Every service will still have unique elements that require thoughtful research and a user-centered approach. But with service patterns, we think we can do that more effectively by freeing up more time for those unique elements and not wasting time on stuff we already know. So, in summary, service patterns are a framework for describing complete user tasks, and they enable consistent user experiences designed and built efficiently. If I may plug a couple of things, I've kicked off something called Service Patterns UK, which is intended as a grassroots community network for people working on service patterns in the UK public sector. I'm not positioning myself as an expert or as the owner of this. It's to be community-led. I'm kicking it off, and our first session is next week, where we're looking for the input from people working on service patterns to understand what would they like from a community to make it easier for us to talk to one another and share things. Kirsty, who I mentioned before, is going to be presenting on that first call. I'll share some links in a moment, but if you'd like to come along to that, please do. Making it about the UK is somewhat arbitrary. You are very welcome if you're not in the UK to come along as well. And yeah, so a few links. I'll put these in the chat as well. If you're interested in joining that community and joining the mailing list, you can do. The first call is next week on the 4th of December. And if you're interested in looking at those cross-government proof of concept patterns I shared earlier, there's a link to those too. And that is it from me, unless Nicola, you want to come in with anything else?
Yeah, just to say, Martin already has hundreds of sign-ups, so there is huge appetite for this. So it's very exciting.
Okay.
Any questions?
Amazing, amazing. May I go first? So I'm curious to understand as well, like how when you work with two other UK government departments, as I understood, like how much or like how much effort does it take to align some of the thinking with DEFRA and DWP, the other departments you mentioned? Like, are there is it easy to come together and say like, oh yeah, this is a thing and it's very similar in our space than it's in your space, and how does that come together? If you can elaborate a little bit more, I'd be very curious to hear that.
That has been quite simple, actually. And I think part of that is because we've all been taking a relatively bottom-up approach. We are looking at this as a problem space as designers. We've had a bit of time to look at it. We've done work internally. But just when we brought together, here's what we found, and we did some simple comparisons, we were already in a very similar place to begin with. I think where the alignment questions have been are more around how strict is our definition of service patterns, what sort of content do we want to focus on. It is perhaps by chance that ourselves, DEFRA and DWP, just came at it from a similar place. But although they've been not so heavily involved, the Department for Education also said they were aligned with what we were doing. So no, it's been straightforward. And I think that just is part that really makes the case that this is kind of obvious, and we shouldn't, let alone making multiple things within departments, doing it across government is even more foolish when we have these consistent needs. This is not what you asked, but I think it's connected to the question you asked Jazz earlier on, though, about what the buy-in and support around it. It is on our minds that this has been a design-led grassroots thing so far, and so for that cross-government working group, our next priority is to try and build out the business case for how we implement this, because we're really conscious of the fact that everyone's got these nice ideas, but what we don't have is organizations that understand it to be a core part of how they organize and design services, that they do this thing called service patterns. And so one of our ideas is we want to explore different use cases for professions beyond design, and get people in from those professions. Maybe, for example, delivery management. Tell us how thinking about scoping out your project with service patterns would help you. And then to bring that all together into a really holistic offering to our senior management. We've got interest from senior people at the Ministry of Justice, but I think we still need to refine what are we asking for? Is it funding? Is it permission? Is it a change to our processes?
Two hands.
I believe James was first.
Hi, yes, thanks. So apologies for possibly babbling baby. I'm relatively new to the UK civil service and to design as a thing, and I'm working at the Office of the Public Guardian, where the majority of what we're doing is paper work and paper design and that sort of stuff for forms. We've just used gov.uk forms, which is fab, for one of our services. The uptake's been great. About 2/3 of form submissions are now with Gov Forms compared to the PDF. But if you extrapolate that out for some of our larger processes that have about 1 million people a year or something, that's still a significant number of people using paper forms. how much I'm aware that this service pattern stems from kind of digital processes. How much kind of interest is there in applying this, and does it cross over nicely into kind of paper processes as well? And do the two link up?
Actually, I had in the last few weeks some really good conversations with our head of content, who is proposing something like this. Can we have templates for the letters we send out and answers and those? So I think this might be something that links in quite nicely in a sort of, we should provide the standardized things that make it easier for you to build a service, and then it doesn't matter is it digital, is it paper. Is it a process in an office and so on?
Go on, Martin.
No,
You
go
go.
on. No, you just go.
So we are working with one of our clients. We don't like to talk about stuff until it's done, but we are working with a client who is paper-based. It's a very complex organisation, very complex, and we are applying the service pattern thinking to it. And the reason why it's actually probably a better opportunity to do it, because you're thinking about your infrastructure more holistically. So when you apply patterns at that really low maturity stage, actually, I think the benefit is even greater. So actually, if you can bring pattern thinking, so when you're looking at your paper-based processes, look at the end-to-end process, spot the patterns up front, then look at the tech stack and the data that needs to flow through it. But actually, you might find greater success if you apply at that early stage. So James, I wish I was in your space. Yeah.
Yes. It's quite fun.
Sorry, Martin, I cut you
No,
in.
I agree with what's being said. I think it actually helps us be more consistent across channel. One of my service design soapboxes is I want to think more about where we have physical touch points, where we're sending things in the post and we're doing things on paper. Yeah.
Thanks all.
I can't wait to see that case study though. That case study is going to be how we implement pattern thinking, which is going to be great.
Malina, go next. Yes.
Thank you very, very much for all your talks. For me, it was super inspiring, and I screenshotted a lot of the slides. So thanks a lot. I was very interested in, you all mentioned culture and how we collaborate as a big factor in what needs to change. I think in Germany, where we also work with the Ministry of Justice in an ecosystem that already has a lot of actors and responsibilities in the federal states. Do you have experience or advice on how to work with those different, I don't know, legacy systems, different types of stakeholders who all have their own ownerships, like their little islands of responsibility, and to build a culture of trying to build something together? I think service patterns could really help here as a bridge and as a help for all of those people. But how do you build a real end-to-end service if it consists of so many little steps that different people are responsible for?
I think something really to consider is building something in a silo is in the short run much faster. So that's why it happens over and over again. Because if people only looking at their slice, it's much faster to just build a thing and not think about that over there. This is the same thing is built. So I think that's the difficulty, that you need to find like a layer that is higher and make the case there. And for us, it was, for example, in the design system. As soon as you start getting numbers together and have a look at how often a thing shows up, about a kind of a wider piece of the organization or government, and then you can say, okay, for example, it costs us £5,000 to build like one component, and we found this component 15 times across Ministry of Justice alone. And this is one small piece that you have on a page, for example. And then you get, well, this is, £75,000 already that we've wasted on this piece. So that's where you can start making the case for we need to think longer term on this. The short term case isn't what that we can make with this. So you need to think at the kind of the waste that happens across things. And you need to find the right people. And I think that's often difficult if we have this where, the budget and everything sits more in the vertical space, and you need to make that case to someone who sits across. So yeah.
Should I come in to answer that a little bit as well? So when you're in a low design maturity space, you need to build trust, right? And we need to be able to speak the language. So a lot of the time when I'm hiring designers, or like we're building a community of designers, sometimes we've worked hard as designers, right? And we love our processes, and we love like the processes that we have to go through in order to, but we can't be rigid, right? We can't go, right, this is how we're going to do a discovery, because those 6-week discoveries don't exist anymore, right? And so we as designers need to adapt to other spaces, right? That's the first thing. And whilst we have to have all our tools in our back pocket and we pull them out as and when we need them, but I think there's a bit of flexibility we as designers need. But then also, like when we go into low design maturity spaces where it's top down, or your policymaker is telling you to jump, sometimes the advice I give to designers is sometimes you just need to prototype that thing and let the evidence and the research like show you a thing. But sometimes as designers we learn a lot as well through prototyping, because actually that person who's been in that industry for a long time probably does know what they're doing. So there's a bit of a learning opportunity for both sides, right? And then I think so that's the first thing, which is designers just need to go into the spaces and build trust and speak the language. Like we've got to do that. That's just like 101. Like when you're in a design leadership position, you're almost like putting designers in those spaces to just do the doing that we need to do. And you hire the right people that've got the right experience, that can hold their ground and say all the right things, ask really good questions, etc. But then there's the organizational layer. So at DFE, for example, you need to make sure that the way that the organization organizes itself with the right levels, responsibilities also looked at. So at DFE, we had like these silos, as Nikola sort of alluded to, but we made sure there was like a lead that was almost the umbrella. And then service designers, because sometimes you need a silo and you need to work within that silo to do it, because that's how you get quite a lot of the doing done. But then you also need to be able to lift your head out of the water and see that helicopter view to make sure that what you're doing in that silo is connecting. And so you need the organizational layers to allow you to do that. And so that taxonomy of people in the organization's role and levels is really important. So there's both things need to happen, because you can't do one without the other. And then the other thing is architecture. So I saw a post online about enterprise architects being quite important, quite fundamental. I agree, it is really important. But traditionally, service designers and org designers work in parallel with architects, and we all like each other, but there's a gap. And there's bridges that we need to create, and we need to work more closely together, which is where patterns, I think, could be really important, because if you take that helicopter view on how you need to stitch things up, you could actually come up with better backlogs and roadmaps in terms of implementation. So, but then when I talk to architects, I'm not going to talk about the client. I move really closely with architects as much as I can, and a lot of the time there's tension there. So when you've got people who are responsible for architecture, they need to be our friends. We need to get really close to them, and sometimes design is seen as a really long process that takes forever to do, and so we need to then work with them to shorten it. Because one of the enterprise architects said to me, well, if I wait for your design process, what am I doing? And so there's a tension there. We need to work with those technical people, because ultimately that infrastructure that the services are built on needs to be adaptable. I work on quite a lot of data projects as well, and there's a big AI, emerging technology. That data needs to flow end to end. I think that's an opportunity for service design, quite frankly. So there's loads that we can do, but it's we need different people with different hats on, and that's why I think the sector is really important. When we're aligned, we can chip away at it from different angles, because one person can't be in all those spaces, right? yeah.
Thank you so much. That was very, very inspiring.
Cool. I think we are at the end of this call. That's what I feel. So Martin mentioned the pattern community, so we can drop as well in Slack another link to that. Also, like the various resources mentioned, we will put them as well into, oh yeah, I can say recording notes, because I think all speakers agreed that this can be even a public recording, which is fantastic. So we'll drop all the things there. As mentioned before, we have a blog post about the community activities of the International Design Government community coming. Kara is working very hard to get it signed off from comps. Let's not go there. And as mentioned, for the Brussels event in April, there's a event page coming up soon. And yeah, on the topic of today, I have the very clear sense that this will not be the last call on the topic, so it would be great to review it sometime later in 2026. But we have many more great topics on our list, and I'd confidently say that we're aiming for another call in January. And on our end, we will check our tooling. So I think this was not the very best, but it somehow did work, and this should have been recorded. So thank you all for joining, presenting, and for listening and asking. This is fantastic. And I'm sure many, many, many people will listen to this and watch this out there. So thanks again for the time and effort. This is fantastic. Great.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
Friday.
you.